Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving right into what has got to be one of the most extreme and honestly fascinating paradoxes on the map, Turkmenistan. It sits right there in the heart of the Eurasian continent, kind of shrouded in mystery, right? It's this wild place where ancient Silk Road history just crashes head-on into modern autocracy. Plus, you've got immense wealth locked inside literally one of the harshest environments on the planet.
Okay, so let's set the stage with a pretty staggering reality. 80%, 80% of this entire country is completely swallowed up by the unforgiving Karakum Desert. To put that into perspective, just imagine a sweeping, sun-scorched ocean of sand dominating the horizon, where water is just incredibly scarce. And this desert, well, it's not just some geographical feature on a map. It's really the ultimate crucible that has shaped the survival and the whole culture of the Turkmen people for millennia.
But here's where it gets crazy. Beneath all that vast, arid sand, there is immense global power. Turkmenistan holds the fourth largest natural gas reserves on the entire planet. It's this incredible juxtaposition, right? You've got this totally barren surface sitting directly on top of what's essentially a subterranean river of gold. And that hidden wealth is the absolute engine driving their modern economy, making them a massively crucial player in the global energy markets.
So how exactly did this extreme landscape shape its destiny? Well, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to quickly hit on its unique geographic crossroads, the ancient empires that rolled through, the massive shifts of the Soviet era, the rise of its modern strongmen, and finally, that really delicate balance between resource wealth and severe environmental crisis.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the desert crossroads. We've got to understand the geography and the Great Silk Road, which is basically the physical stage where thousands of years of history played out. Now, when you think of this area, you might just picture an endless, monotonous desert. But actually, it's packed with geographic extremes. You've got the massive Caspian Sea out to the west, and then the towering Kopet Dağ mountain range. And what happens is, those mountains create this rain shadow effect, which forms these really unique microclimates. Because of that, in these isolated, super fertile river valleys, ancient oasis cities like Merv and Tejan were able to completely defy the odds and thrive.
And those oasis cities were absolutely critical. See, long before Turkmenistan was the somewhat isolated nation we know today, it was basically the ultimate global crossroads. The Great Silk Road cut right through this terrain. Imagine this bustling, totally cosmopolitan hub where Chinese silk scholars and merchants bumped right into the Mediterranean and Western worlds. Just a constant, buzzing exchange of ideas and wealth.
Which brings us to part two, empires of the Silk Road. Because when you have prime real estate sitting right on the world's most vital trade route, it naturally makes you a massive target. So over the centuries, just this relentless wave of empires washed over the region. It starts way back with the Parthian Empire in the 2nd century BC. And these guys were so powerful, they literally rivaled Rome. Fast forward to the 7th century and the Islamic conquest rolls in, fundamentally changing the cultural landscape. Then the Seljuk Empire turns the whole place into the stunning center of Islamic architecture. But then came the 13th century, the earth-shattering conquest of Genghis Khan's Mongol hordes, and they basically leveled those ancient beautiful cities right into the dust.
But incredibly, out of all that Mongol devastation came Timur. And he recognized this really profound truth. It's beautifully captured in the philosophy. After the sword, a wise person removes the sword and transfers it to the pen. This mindset completely shifted the region into what we call the Timurid Renaissance. Suddenly, they were prioritizing art, poetry, astronomy, basically turning these steps into the intellectual envy of the entire world.
All right, let's fast forward a bit to part three, the Soviet era. We're moving from colonization to central planning here, as the whole geopolitical gravity of the area pulled heavily toward Russia. So the Russians initially showed up around the 1860s, mostly looking for a buffer zone. After the Bolshevik Revolution, the region got completely absorbed into the massive Soviet machine as the Turkmen SSR in 1921. Now, this didn't happen without a fight. It actually sparked the Basmachi movement, which was this fierce, though ultimately unsuccessful, tribal resistance. But the real game changer? That hit in 1954. The very first major gas field was discovered, and that literally forever altered Turkmenistan's economic destiny.
But here is the ultimate heartbreaking irony of that era. Despite sitting on an absolute gold mine of natural gas and some highly sought-after cotton, the local population saw almost none of that wealth. Zero.
All the big decisions were being made miles away in Moscow. So you get this rigid central planning and bureaucratic inertia, which resulted in severe economic mismanagement. Honestly, it meant incredibly low living standards for the everyday people who were living right on top of billions of dollars of resources.
Moving into part 4, independence and autocracy. That old Soviet dynamic shattered with the sudden, totally unexpected collapse of the USSR in 1991. It threw Turkmenistan into a brand new, yet still highly controlled, reality under a series of strongmen.
Independence first brought Saparmurat Niyazov to power, and wow, he ruled with a heavy, deeply paranoid hand, creating this unbelievable cult of personality. I mean, the guy literally renamed the months of the year after himself and his mother. He even built a giant golden statue of himself that rotated so it would always face the sun. Just wild stuff. After he passed away in 2006, Gurbanguly Berdymukhammedov took over. Now, he definitely kept the strict authoritarian structure in place, but he shifted things toward a more tightly calculated international outreach. He specifically focused on securing vital energy ties with both Moscow and Beijing.
Now, to survive in an incredibly volatile region, remember, they're bordering Afghanistan and Iran, the state pulled off what was honestly a brilliant geopolitical maneuver back in 1995. They secured UN-backed permanent neutrality. And this isn't just some diplomatic buzzword. It's literally their constitutional survival strategy. It allows Turkmenistan to do business and sell gas to China or Russia or the West while officially allying with absolutely no one.
But right beneath that rigid political structure lies a pretty surprising demographic reality. You might picture an aging, Soviet-style populace when you think of the region, but actually, a staggering 63% of Turkmenistan is under 30 years old. 63%! This massive youth wave is hands down the country's greatest potential engine for growth. But at the same time, it's a massive pressure point for a government that desperately needs to provide employment and modernize. Which leads us right into our final section, Part 5, Resources and Environment. Because that booming young population, they're inheriting immense riches for sure, but also some absolutely severe ecological peril.
The whole economy basically balances on two pillars: natural gas and what they call green gold, cotton. The revenues from exporting these are what funded those majestic, gleaming marble-clad palaces you see in the capital city of Ashgabat today. But here is the massive catch. Trying to grow highly water-intensive cotton in a country that is, remember, 80% desert, that requires massive, super aggressive manipulation of an already deeply scarce water supply. And that aggressive manipulation led to some truly tragic collateral damage, specifically from Soviet-era megaprojects like the Karakum Canal. It was built to divert water for all that cotton, but over the decades, it has essentially dumped billions of liters of highly saline water straight into the desert. This triggered severe wind erosion, secondary soil salinization, and aggressive human-caused desertification. Basically, the desert is literally expanding, swallowing up the tiny fraction of farmable land that they even have left.
Modern Turkmenistan simply can no longer ignore this. They are completely in a race against time. The government is scrambling now to implement new water-saving technologies, explore stuff like drip irrigation, and launch massive forestation projects. They're desperately trying to halt this ecological disaster before the damage to their ancient flora and fauna becomes completely irreversible.
So as we wrap up this explainer, you really have to look at the path ahead and wonder. They're trying to balance this extremely strict, centralized control with a booming, energized youth population. They're sitting on world-class wealth, yet they're facing a creeping, human-accelerated desert. Can they actually leverage their neutral status to build a sustainable future? Or is the sheer weight of their history just going to hold them back? It's a fascinating question, and for sure, one the world will be watching closely. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.